Hey everyone, it's Chris Gio from Merchant Method, and I am so excited to welcome you to Season 5 of Retail Charm School. So Retail Charm School is a fantastic way for me to be able to continue connecting with you, to share insights and lessons from clients inside my private group coaching program, and just to explore my deepest curiosities about the things that you're concerned about. And this season is dedicated to me interviewing some of my favorite people that are adjacent to the retail and maker space, but are 100% aligned in terms of creative thinking, creative problem solving, and thinking through those higher level thoughts you have as someone who loves your customers, is trying to be a little bit ahead or a lot ahead of what they think they need or want for themselves, and as someone who's just trying to function like values and heart first. So we're kicking it off with a really good friend and a really good colleague, Charles Fadum, who is with Board and Vellum. Now I'm going to introduce him in a second, but what I want to do is get you really excited about what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is receiving critique, which is distinctly different than getting criticized. The reason why I think this could not be a more perfect time for us to talk about it is because we've been invited by the situation at hand, either gently or we've been invited passive aggressively to do things very differently. And what I love about you as a merchant is you're looking for that feedback. But before we can like jump into this experimentation and jump into moving and grooving with the feedback that we're getting, I think it's really important for us to understand what the creative critique process is. And I thought, who better for us, you and I, to learn from than Charles? So I'm going to bring Charles in. I'm super excited. We're going to give him a hand, okay? Let's bring in Charles here. Yay, Charles! Yay!
Hello,
Okay,
hello.
so Charles, you can do whatever you want with your face as I give my introduction to you, okay? Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay. So Charles is a commercial and residential architect, and he has had a fantastic career moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. He worked for years in New York, and his background, what I love about his background is it's eclectic: corporate interiors and residential interiors, and that's really how I know Charles is on the corporate and residential side, historical restoration, and really high-rise mixed-use residential. On his journey to Board and Vellum, he's had layovers in Philadelphia and in Washington, D.C., and he's developed a really big passion for designing the human scale experience. And I want you to explain that to me because I don't understand what that is. But about 4 years ago, he joined Board and Vellum, a firm here in Seattle, Washington, and has been here since. And so that is the more studied background of Charles. And I would like him to, Charles, introduce yourself, please.
Hi. First, Chris, thank you for having me on. This is super exciting, and I love chatting with you. So I'm Charles Fadum. I work at Board and Vellum. I'm the commercial studio lead. Our studio at Board and Vellum designs coffee shops and restaurants and office spaces and multifamily interior amenity spaces, and we're on Capitol Hill here in Seattle. And I'm thrilled to chat. This is going to be a lot of fun.
So, when we were chatting, we were chatting, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago on your podcast. So Charles is the co-host of the Design Coggles podcast, and he invited me on to chat about like what the future of retail might look like. And that I loved having that conversation. It was really interesting. And shortly after that, I thought I'm really curious to learn more about the creative critique process. And when I invited you to chat with me about it, kind of what were some of your immediate thoughts around what this conversation could be? And I'd love to know from the audience, like, what would you love to know about giving and receiving critiques around creative work?
Yeah, when you mentioned it was going to be about criticism and the creative process, criticism is the backbone of the creative process. Without criticism, design can't evolve. It can't adapt to solve problems. It's what transforms a hobby into something that can change the world. And that's what excites me about design is that design can solve so many problems and create a better future. All the potential is wrapped up in criticism, which is inherently something that's hard to give and hard to receive. And it's a challenge, but it is the challenge.
Okay, so pretend that we are a bunch of high school students and we think we want to explore a career in architecture or
Mhm.
interior design, and you had to explain what a creative critique is. Give it to us like 101 style.
Sure. A critique is the presentation of an idea translated through design or art of any medium. It could be architecture, it could be art, it could be music, it doesn't matter. And one or many people consume that art or music and they give you their reactions, both positive and negative. And there's many ways to do that. Sometimes it's a one-on-one and it's a collaborative effort. It's criticism while you're sitting there and making a thing and actively changing it. Sometimes it's a much more formalized process where a person is standing and presenting, and a jury of peers or authority figures like professors or critics sit and give you feedback in a formal way. And there's everything in between, from casual conversations to long, deep dives.
Is it are there ground rules?
There can be and should be. In fact, there kind of needs to be. I was chatting with a colleague about this, that there needs to be a structure to criticism. Otherwise, it's all just noise. If you shout out an idea or or show a creative piece to a massive crowd of people and then yell, "What do you think?" and then 10,000 people yell back at you, that's not useful criticism, regardless of the quality of the individual voices. So you need to select the voices that are going to give you criticism carefully and create a structure in which that criticism can be given and received in a useful way, in a practical way.
So, kind of what you said that was really important to me is being selective to make sure that there's value.
Right.
And I think for me, I can't help but think that the two things are really important in that. Number one is trust, right? Because the
For sure.
trust, either trust slash respect, two ways. Do you think having a comprehensive understanding of context is important, or is tabula rasa going to be fine too? Like someone just coming to, like, you might trust them and respect them, and they have no understanding of the context of this like body of work or this idea.
I think it scales, and especially if in your early days of receiving criticism regularly, I think a level of trust and mutual respect between the creator and the critic is key. You have to understand that if you show them your creative work and they are like, I don't like anything about it, here are the 100 things that are wrong with this, that they're doing that to make your work better. They're not doing that to discourage you and send you running to the hills and telling you not to do what you're doing. And understanding that that's coming from a supportive place is very, very important. But the idea is that those are building blocks and that you can graduate to other levels of receiving criticism to the point where you have a level of confidence in what you're creating and doing, and you invite any and all criticism, and you have an expertise that allows you to understand the levels of context that your critic may or may not have. It's the difference between a person who knows nothing about music listening to a piece that you created versus a professor of music, and everything in between. You need to graduate really to getting criticism from the uninitiated.
Oh, I love that. So our friends over at Sendel loved what you just said. They said, select the voices that are going to give you criticism. And they think that that comment is so good. And I think it is too. So let's just say we wanted to think. So but here's, I've been this is the time where everyone is reevaluating everything. And
Mhm,
I've been asked to think like who is on my metaphoric board of directors, right? Whether it's like who do we want to look to as either mentors or those that might give us critique. Um, to maybe those that are just muses. Like if we're thinking through either at a brand level or at a
mhm,
project level, what are some things that we should think about when it comes to selecting voices, particularly since the megaphone goes so far and wide with things
mhm.
like Facebook Live or Instagram? Like, how do you select?
I think you need a spread of people from eclectic backgrounds, people who understand your medium and people that don't. The worst thing you can do is create a little echo chamber for yourself where everybody pats you on the back and tells you you're doing great just for the validation. That can feel good in the short term, just completely wasting your time altogether. To be honest, you need a spread. You need a couple people that are really initiated, understand what you do, some people that don't, and be easy on yourself your first round. Don't invite five of the potential hardest critics you're going to have on day one, but then scale it as you go and get comfortable with people telling you that they don't like X about your thing, and realize that you should at the end of this process be leaning into that. You should be excited for the tell me no and why.
Oh, I love that. So, before we talk about okay, I want to talk about two things. First, I want to talk about like how do you go about asking that
Mhm,
person, right? So you've been so great in the time that I've known you where I've just been able to email you or text you and say, "Hey Charles, I want to explore this like weird idea
mhm.
because I need it needs some shaping."
Right.
And I don't want to like have that conversation with myself. So, how do you ask? Um, and two, how do you start to know or intuit whether someone's a good fit for that or they're not? And I think some of that second piece is like developing thick skin. So let's first explore like how do you make the ask?
uh, Design the question. I
Okay.
think if you make the asking, you're just like, I don't know why I keep picking on music. Just like, what do you think of this song? You're gonna get a response that's like, it's great, or oh, I don't like it, and that's not at all productive. But if that's the fifth question you have, if you're like, explain the context yourself. I made this thing. I'm uncertain. These are the questions I have. This is what I don't understand. I need someone to help me break it down, fill in the blanks. Am I using these tools correctly to make the thing? Let me show you my process. You have to be self-critical first, and you have
Hmm.
to find out to know what you don't know. Fill in all the blanks around, and then find the gaps. And then you need someone to help you fill in the gaps. And making the ask can be scary. And I think also choosing a person who you know is going to criticize you is scary and understandably scary. And you could even say that, you know what, I'm a little apprehensive to get criticism, but I know I need it. And also, this is something that I tell clients all the time, is that I invite negative criticism. I always say a no is more useful than a yes.
Oh
When
my gosh.
someone
Okay,
tells
hold
me,
on. Stop. Mic drop. A no is more useful than a yes. Okay.
right, when people give me feedback that they don't like something, that is the easiest way for me to rudder towards the solution. But if I present five options or five works, and everybody's like, "Oh, I like all of these," I don't know where to go. I don't have a direction, um, and you need someone to start pulling options off the table. You need someone to start framing the problem and framing the solution for you.
I think that piece is so important to say it frequently and often. Like a no is more valuable than a yes. And I think design the question as a light bulb moment for Sendel. And I think it's true. We forget that uh, other areas of our life and our past professional experiences can help us in inviting people to our brain trust or our board of
Yeah.
directors, right? So in a way that you might interview a potential candidate or a
Hmm.
potential roommate or a dog sitter. You're not just asking a very general question.
Hmm.
So part of the creative work is we love it in the way that we love other, any other thing about our life that is organic or that we care for a lot.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that we're asking almost a question that could either lead to the answer that we need or totally the other direction. And that's fine
Hmm.
too.
Right.
Um, I I like this. Like it's okay to say no. I say often like I'm happy to be right and I'm also happy to be wrong. Like I could
Right.
be wrong all day. I could be right all day. It's fine. I don't care. Happy
Right.
to be wrong. Happy to be right. Okay, so that is really interesting. Um, so then let's talk a little bit about this piece of you've invited someone into the in. You've just invited them in and you've invited yourself to be open. Um, I kind of feel like it really just is about exposure and time and being like exposed to the elements,
Hmm.
right? Metaphorically
Yeah.
exposed to the elements and just like letting the wind just soften the edges and
Hmm.
just give you a little bit of patina so that when the criticism does come in and the negative critique does come in, um, it doesn't just zing us as to our like tender spot of a worthy being
Right.
and where we can just separate personal worth from the expression, like the creative expression. So like how
Yes.
do people get to that space? I think it's just doing it a lot. But am I wrong?
No, that is exactly what it is. You need to be criticized. You need to be criticized often, and you need to be criticized from many different over and over again. You invite that criticism, and that is not easy. There isn't a creator out there. All creatives are passionate, and who they are is tied up with the things they make. And it is not an intuitive thing for a human being, I don't think, to just be able to listen to people, tell them the problems with their creations, and be like, yeah, that feels great. It takes a lot of practice. It's a skill to be able to immediately translate criticism as productive and as valuable. Even after 20, 30 years of receiving criticism with creative work, there is still an element of just a little bit of emotional pain every time someone criticizes something. You eventually get to the point where it's very instantaneous, and then you move on to like, oh no, this is good, this is productive, I'm leaning into it. But that's not easy, and it's hard on the critics too. It's very difficult to give a person criticism that is productive, and not tell them what they want to hear because you care about them. And especially if you're a critic, this is such an important part of it, is that if you've been invited to be a critic, it's more about tough love than it is about love. It is so much more about pushing them to get a little uncomfortable, pushing them towards the thing that's just not working, that they can't see. It's a burden if you don't look at it that way, and if you try too hard to frame it all in supportive language. But it's important to start with supportive language. I get caught in this trap too. Sometimes I'll look at a piece and I'll zoom right to the thing that is a problem, and I try to pull myself back, and I'm like, wait, how can I frame this properly so that there's a signal to the creator that these are words of encouragement, even if I'm saying something negative about a piece. And that's a really helpful tool to like frame or sandwich harsh criticism in words of encouragement, if you can. Also very challenging.
I as you were just saying that last bit, I was thinking about the sandwich method, which is such an oversimplified version. I mean, it's formulaic in
Hmm.
that it works. It's like
Right.
compliment, opportunity, compliment.
Hmm.
And it is you can spot it a mile away,
Hmm.
I think the reason why we have those practices is almost script like until we get comfortable. Either we develop intimacy or we develop our own style or we understand who it is that we might be advising or what we're stepping into.
Hmm.
And it also reminds us too that people have different levels of experience receiving
Hmm.
criticism.
Oh yeah.
I was having a conversation with my oldest son, Nick, he's 12. Seattle Public Schools is giving out laptops
Hmm.
to middle schoolers, and he's getting a laptop tomorrow. And there's this whole piece of the waiver around conduct in school, and then just a reminder about conduct online around the worst end of critique, which is bullying, right? It's
Hmm.
just like
Right.
throwing shade, thinking you're
Hmm.
being helpful, um, and then and someone feeling like they're being bullied
Hmm.
from unwelcomed critique. So, have you in your life, and if you're watching anyone, had to say thanks so much? You're no longer welcome in this circle. No thanks, but thanks. It's been real.
I am weird. Well, maybe not in this way. I am my own harshest critic, or I've evolved into my own harshest critic, and I now, having my entire profession is all structured around creativity and criticism. I look for the harshest critics all the time. And whenever I find one, a critic who's super comfortable with just crushing my work and pulling it apart, that's the person I look for the most. And once you form a close relationship with those people, you can get hyper fast, efficient, effective criticism. Um, and that's what you goes back to what you're saying before about trust. That's only possible with trust. And that same interaction, if without that trust, could be bullying. And I think that that's the big difference is that bullying is criticism that's not productive. It's not meant in a productive way. And there is no context or level of trust in the criticism.
It's interesting. So I was chatting with one of my clients last week, and she is doing more live on Instagram. I feel like every merchant is doing more live stream
Hmm.
and using Instagram stories more. And that just invites, like when you invite comments and when you invite interaction, it's like being open to the public. You're open to the public, you're inviting it all, even
Hmm.
bots and spam. And she got feedback from someone that was not nice. It would be
Hmm.
as if, and I've had this kind of feedback. Um, you need to calm your eyes down. You need to
Hmm.
calm down. What's going on with your face? Like all of that. And when you're able to ground yourself in a reason, like when I'm able to ground myself in a reason, I really like actually repelling. And I like having a either a strong yes or a strong no. And
Hmm.
somewhere in between, like I could take it or leave it, leaves me feeling like more could be pulled out of me and I can
Hmm.
contribute more
Hmm.
if someone's lukewarm about it.
Hmm.
And maybe that's audacity. Maybe it's trying to figure out what my strong point of view is. Um, but this piece of if everyone's their own harshest critic, I just think that that's the case. Anyone like that we would interact with, or anyone that might run a brand that we personally feel connected to, probably their own harshest critic. I don't know people
Hmm.
who aren't. That's just not in.
Hmm.
Maybe I don't know enough people, but I don't know people who aren't. Um, and I've found in a space where I'm inviting superficial criticism um, or superficial comments, I just do a block delete because there's so much spam and there's stuff that isn't helpful. But I
Hmm.
think there's also a lot of critique in things that are unsaid, right? So things like the lukewarm response,
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
like lackluster engagement, um, poor revenue, runaway expenses, things like that, like open rates, click through rates. And in that way, for me, I am a very like inviting the feedback. It's not always data driven. Sometimes it's just data inspired.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's intuitive, but a lot of reading between the lines of what critique can I take from that. So when I think about like your ability to separate your like personal Charles from professional Charles, and me on my journey, all of us on our journey to separate ourselves from our brand or our work, I feel like a lot of the ability to do that is to strongly embrace either the assignment in hand, like the creative assignment at hand, or the purpose of the creative assignment, or the brand values. And that anchors us. It's kind of like this whole notion of like radical candor, right?
Hmm.
Is there's something so much more important than my feelings,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So
Hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about getting to this place because I talk on and on about brand values and like we have to use it to anchor everything and activating the values that you have professionally is what helps us separate the ego from the creative that makes the work. But I also think creative assignments are really helpful, whether even if what we're doing is purely exploratory. I have my understanding of what I think a creative assignment is based on my experience, but how would you explain that?
That's a really good question. Um, yeah, self-assigned creative assignments. They could be written, they could be drawn. We actually did an assignment, an exercise in criticism at the office once, where
Ooh.
we showed a couple of images of very bad ideas, and then asked people to constructively criticize those ideas. And like, one of the ideas was like eating a Tide Pod, or like, it was, a pickle flavored popsicle, or a terrible phone holster for a silly ideas. But then we pretended, oh, imagine a coworker presented this to you and you had to criticize it in a constructive way. And it was a great exercise. You know, I Creative assignments are a great way to prepare yourself for criticism. Create something you're not emotionally wrapped up in, and then get criticism on that, and then create something you are emotionally wrapped up in and see how different the experience is. That's very, very helpful and could help teach you how to distance your emotions during the critical phase of it.
I also think too, like in your work as an architect and in the work that you've done with me and my family, I think part of it too is like understanding the scope of what we wanted, like you as an interpreter and as a
Mhm.
creator of work on behalf of someone else. Um, I think part of it is like just scoping out the project, right?
For sure. Choosing a project properly and for the right purpose. Absolutely.
So when you're looking at like, and like, let's start to get like pretty pragmatic here. When you're looking at choosing the right project, understanding, right? Because creativity happens in collaboration, right? Like
Hmm.
creative,
Oh,
even if,
absolutely.
right, it just happens in collaboration.
Hmm.
What are the things, what are the obvious and the subtle cues that you look for?
Great question. When we are choosing a client, it's a partnership, and they're choosing us, and we're also choosing them. You're choosing a creative collaborator, in a sense, and you need to be the right match. And oftentimes, one of you recognizes it's not the right match. And being very upfront about that is key in both directions. If you're telling yourself things from the very beginning about, oh, you have a feeling it might not work, but I'm gonna force it. I'm gonna make it work. It's always that's a bad sign. That's a very bad sign. And that's easy to say, but in like a downturn like this, that gets a little harder, and you find yourself making decisions that might stray from your values or stray from those little flags that might get raised in your head. But you're choosing a creative partner is so key. Choosing one that's going to be supportive, that understands the context, that's open to new ideas as much as you're, as a creator, being asked to be open to new ideas. All key. And even not internally, I've heard friends who own businesses speak about this sometimes, about a partnership they went into and they see so much clearly now afterwards, what that they could see what didn't work, but they told themselves a story, and they learned from those experiences. And it's a challenge and a learning experience. And I think learning to trust your instincts in the very beginning about who you choose and why is very key. It's very much just like human relationships, creative relationships. They're very similar.
Yes.
Hmm.
And I think too, like a lot of exercises are really about learning to trust yourself. Just
Hmm.
total aside, some people know this about me and some people don't, is I really enjoy tarot cards and oracle cards. And for
Hmm.
me, it's just more like learning to trust my intuition.
Hmm.
But that requires like also being critical and like using analytics and looking back at my own past and looking forward to a vision I want
Hmm.
and living in the present, in the past, and in the
Right.
future all at the same time. Like for me, when I think about the phrase creative assignment, and I might be using it in a way that really is only relevant to me, but I'll explain it. Is in a past life, I worked for a gifting company that their area of expertise is inspirational gifting. And I
Hmm.
was working in product development and I was an account manager. So I was the middle person selling products to a giant retailer, private label products to a giant retailer, working also with a broker that had a relationship with that giant retailer, and then our manufacturer, and kind of managing the development of all of that. And we had in house designers. And so part of the creative assignment was very pragmatic, kind of like when you are trying to decide who the right client is to enter a partnership with.
Hmm.
And we're looking at market research, we're looking at opportunity, we're looking at what's worked well in the past, and what we're ready to just retire
Hmm.
and like create something new. And so for a lot of people in inventory based businesses, this is a lot looking like product development, product assortment, and thinking through customer, like truly customer choice, and just starting not from the world as our oyster, but from being grounded in the fact that we're the merchant and we are being asked to lead and shape a piece of that relationship to begin with.
Hmm.
And so for me, creative assignments are really about customer choice and like what does the customer want, what works well, what doesn't, and setting those first initial boundaries.
Hmm.
So if you don't have a boundary, it's so hard to know what to do and where to go. And in
Hmm.
fact, the more clearly defined the boundaries and the more boundaries there are, the more
Hmm.
likely it is that we'll get to a place at the end that matters for the people that
Oh,
it
I
matters
completely agree.
most to, right?
Hmm.
And so it's hard to say like, yeah, I'm a creative and I'm going to start
Hmm.
from a place of boundaries. But I think if we're
Hmm.
trying to like really make an honest living out of it, or drive an honest profit, it needs some of that boundaries to make the person happy, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You said something really interesting. You when you were talking about intuition, because there is kind of a interesting aspect of intuition is educated intuition. When you hire an expert to come in and criticize your work and help you reform it, this person isn't just making stuff up off the top of their head and tell you things. They have an intuition that is educated by trial and error and failure and creating boundaries and reworking them. And intuition is built through criticism. And there's sometimes a fallacy about an expert coming in and just like, oh, what does this person really know? I've been in this business as long as they have. What do they know more than I do? But a person who has made criticism their business has such an educated intuition that they can come in and quickly assess these things in a different way. Intuition is a fascinating thing and such a key part of criticism.
I'm going to send this in for transcription so I could just pull that section out of what you said because I loved it. I loved it. So I want to move now into accountability. And I'll be really honest with you, Charles. Like last week, I've been thinking a lot about accountability in my own professional accountability, not just to my clients and to the industry that I love the most, but even just to myself and to the accountability to my goals. And it's been some time since I've been in a professional accountability group with people that are not merchants. And I love being
Hmm.
with people outside. So sometimes I'm with writers, other times I'm in an accountability group with people that are in health and wellness. I just like the mix and the gamut.
Hmm.
And I think one of the challenges with accountability right now is we are there's such a huge unknown, and the idea of being accountable in a future that is unknown either feels unrealistic or like a huge ask based on our real monetary resources or other non-monetary resources or like our personal level of energy or what we can
Hmm.
give time. But I think part of the critique process and inviting people in to critique is we're inviting and then we're saying, and I will do something based on your feedback.
Yeah.
Right? Versus just tell me what you think and I will do nothing with it. And so I
Right.
think part of the critique process is the accountability that, and I will now do something next.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't just pat yourself on the back for receiving criticism. Like,
Right.
oh man, that those people said some harsh things about my stuff. I really put myself out there. All right, I'm gonna do what I was gonna do anyway. But wow, that what a great exercise. Like, no, you're not educating yourself at all, and you're not your work isn't going to be any better for it, whatever you do. And I'm seeing actually a strange trend actually in creative circles right now is that creative circles, from what I've observed, are still looking very much inward instead of outward. Even among designers, I've seen online design communities, designers are just talking about other designers and other design and not looking outward at the world. Because I think right now it's a scary world to look out into. And that's a part of accountability too.
So, if you're just joining us, Charles and I are talking about critiquing the creative process, and we're exploring this whole idea around uh, inviting critique and holding ourselves accountable to do something with the feedback, whether the feedback is what we wanted or on the other end or neutral. And when we think through moving forward in our creative process in a time of huge unknown, Charles, I'd love to know for you, like, what are some of the tools you use? Because I'm a huge believer that even though we don't know what the future holds for us, we still plan because
Hmm.
planning helps us identify what's most important to us. And it gives us that time where we need to be exposed to the elements to get weathered a little bit. Like it gives us experience. So in all of this creative work that you're doing and the critique that you're receiving in a future that's unknown, like how do you still move forward in a process?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for the commercial sector in general, this is a time of huge uncertainty. You know, all of the commercial sectors, whether it's restaurant, hotel, any type of hospitality, is in the middle of a sea change, and we don't know how long it's going to last and what everything is going to look like afterwards. And a lot of what I hear is, when are things going to go back to the way they were? When are things going to return to normal? Is it Tuesday? Is it 4 weeks from now? 8 weeks from now? When can I open my door and everything go back to the way it was? And for me, that's the wrong question. The questions I am asking are, how are we all different? And how will we all be different together after all of this? How has society evolved, for better and for worse? There are going to be, I think, some amazing changes in the way we interact, the way we socialize, the way we form relationships. Our relationship with space in general, I think, is shifting in a way that can be scary because it's uncertain. But in the end, I think will be, in certain aspects, really exciting. Really exciting.
Okay, I want to explore that. And I feel like in order for us to explore that responsibly,
Hmm.
we need to talk about grieving first,
Mm.
right? Like
Hmm.
grieving what either grieving the creative work that you thought you were going to be bringing to life but is somehow iterated,
Hmm.
or letting go of an idea that you loved so much but it's not the right direction to go in, grieving the plans that we thought we had for 2020, or even the brand or the business or the project that we
Hmm.
started with changes.
Yeah.
As someone who professionally creates over and over and over again, do you have a process of letting go? Or what was your early process of letting go?
Personally, I am a adaptable change person. I love it when things change, and I'm always looking to change everything. I'm constantly evolving my creative process. I think this time is the hardest for the planners, and most entrepreneurs are planners on multiple levels and are planning for all sorts of different eventualities. And I have a friend who uh, tried to plan for every scenario that could have happened in terms of the economy, in terms of supply and demand, and the person is just was momentarily at a loss because these plans just aren't they don't apply. It's not it No matter what you think is going to happen, things went a different way, and this person luckily quickly tossed it up and threw it away and admitted for a moment they didn't know. And I think that's the scariest moment, and the moment you need to sit with for just a second. Don't distract yourself by making a new plan or drawing a new thing immediately. Don't distract yourself by, inviting a bunch of validating information coming in. It's so difficult to sit with the uncomfortable feeling for a moment that those plans don't work, those ideas are old, and for a minute I have to be okay with not knowing what's next, not knowing what's happening right now. And it's challenging, and I definitely had to do that myself as well. In terms of design, even I'm just the rule book has been thrown out, and that was uncomfortable for a minute.
It's interesting. So I think it's important, merchants, and like just doing like a quick little shout out to you, to really understand what your style is coming into 2020, and the style that's allowed you to be successful to now. Like, there are some merchants that are fly by the seat of your pants, maverick, like could take a mountain bike to an area they've never been to and like the split decision making, knowing that they can make decisions in the moment. On the other end, there's the type of biker that wants to prepare and practice for a very long, grueling, like 200-mile ride. And
Mm-hmm.
then there are others that want to do it in community and strategize together and think through and get feedback on their bike and their fit. Like, you know, all like those are like even just a few styles
Mm-hmm.
in the way that people operate, from, maverick to like the thinker, create, like I think out loud and I don't land the plane quickly, to like I'm very thoughtful and I plan a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think moving into this future, um, it is likely that your style will be unchanged. And understanding like how Charles processes it, how I process it, is going to be really different if we are not the same type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And so really understanding your style and like giving yourself, like Charles said, the moment to contextualize it, to be in this like in between space, to grieve if you need to grieve, before moving forward. Because chances are, if you're a planner in an unknown space, you'll still have tendency to plan, and you will feel ungrounded if you don't provide your own context with that. Or if you're someone who likes to think out loud in community with other people, you'll just be up here on this plane over and over and over again, not ever
Mm-hmm.
landing, or you'll be admiring a problem for which there's like no known solution yet. So it's to understand yourself, to expose yourself to other people, like Charles said, like not be in an echo chamber, and invite more of this critique in, and invite more thoughts in, because we're in this like collective space where we are really limiting, um, for self-preservation reasons, really limiting the input.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to like broaden that out a little bit. Like
Absolutely.
really good to broaden it out a little bit. So like what so if, now that we've had this moment to be responsible and talk about the creating process of creative projects, of what we thought it was going to be, of maybe even
Hmm.
what we thought we were owed from the result of our hard work, and we
Hmm.
look forward, like how do you, Charles, as the professional that you are, as the person that you are, um, how far forward are you looking? And like, what are your biggest curiosities about creativity and kind of rising to the challenge of creative problem solving, and bringing beautiful things into the world and beautiful experiences?
Hmm.
Like, what what's going on in that head of yours?
Yeah, well, my very first thought before I had started to do any research or look forward was design is going to be so incredibly key in whatever world we enter back into in the next phase for all of us. It started with just picking up on an article I read about copper, about how copper used to be used on doorknobs and sinks because it was antiseptic and it kills microbes, and that was why copper at one time was so ubiquitous. And I thought that was fascinating, and it for me connected this circuit that, oh, there are design solutions to this. And I started to think about, well, okay, there are going to be new types of restaurants, new types of coffee shops, new types of retail experiences, hotel hospitality experiences. What are the things that aren't going to work anymore? What are the things that are definitely we're going to have to leave behind? And I thought of the long table. The long table in a restaurant is one of the simplest and most adaptable design moves. You put a nice big long table, two beds, whether it's a coffee shop or a restaurant, you've got seating for 20. It's adaptable. If somebody wants to sit with a laptop, they can. Shoulder to shoulder, interaction, privacy. But personal space is different now. It's just different. We have a different idea of the value of that 6 foot bubble around us. And the long table just isn't going to be a thing anymore. Everybody is going to see themselves differently and their proximity to another person differently. And throwing out the old seating arrangements, the ratio between people serving a customer and how many customers, that's all going to be different. I started to think a little bit more in terms of personalized experiences. This was something that the market was talking a lot about prior to all of this. And personalized experiences feel like a thing that was reserved for only the wealthiest among us. But there really wasn't a whole lot of demand for them before. And now that people could want a little more distance between one another, personalized experiences could see a huge boom of a one-on-one interaction with a salesperson, with spaces specifically designed for them, at appointments reserved for them, and designing around that, additional design adaptability around creating personal experiences. These are all things that are starting to get me really excited.
Ooh, I knew you were getting excited about it, so I put you on camera yourself so you can have a moment and rage it. I think um what's super interesting is, you and I talked about this on the design goggles episode, that this need to have interaction in person, face to face, in person, in real time, synchronously, is not going to go away. It is part of the human experience. It's why we live in community. It's
Mhm.
just in our DNA.
Right.
And when we think through our responsibility to public safety, right? As when we put our
Mhm.
business hat on, as someone who's open for business, when we think about our responsibility to public safety, it really is about inviting, and cultivating like really small communities, the one-on-one experience, like you said. And that is where this emotional intelligence, I think, comes in. And that's where we can't, um, maybe always scrape the data and try and put people into personas, because as soon as we go one to a few or one to one, it is
Mhm.
become it becomes extremely nuanced. What we think the experience is going to be like can extend no further than I ask a question and I wait to hear your answer.
Mhm.
Um, so I agree with you. I think I hadn't thought in the same way about the long table the way you have.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I remember, even just as a person who didn't understand how deeply passionate she was going to end up being about small business and about retail and about, even just like the restaurant or the cafe experience. I remember the introduction of the community table in Washington, D.C. And I remember thinking, I don't like the community table. I remember thinking, I don't want to sit with other people because it was about me. At that point, I was like
Right.
young. I was not even in my 20s. I was so self conscious. I had like, no, I just was very young and naive and just didn't even know how to be in community with other people that I didn't already have context for. I didn't
Mhm.
understand the stranger thing. And now, fast forward years later, almost 20 years later, I would go to a neighborhood cafe where it is just every table is a community table. I mean, it's
Mhm.
all up for grabs. And
Right.
understanding that that's totally changing. But the interaction doesn't change. It's interesting, even as we get deliveries, right, for groceries,
Mhm.
or as packages come to the mail, my deep instinct to like give the person their timing to walk
Mhm.
away from my door and open the door and speak loudly to say, thank you so much. Have a good day. Like, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Right.
Um, Even just the simplicities of
Mhm.
niceties is gonna
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've heard some people saying in response, "Oh, that's silly. Like in time, everything's going to go back to the way it was, and this isn't going to be a problem anymore." And I thought of the Great Depression. And the Great Depression changed the habits of an entire generation for the rest of their lives. There were people who grew up during the Depression or lived during the Depression that were still filling their mattresses with cash decades later. Our behaviors, just like you were describing of that waiting, that is going to become part of our subconscious on some level. And safety is both a scientific thing and a feeling. And I think you hit the nail on the head that you felt safer at that distance. And I see a lot. I went to get a coffee at the grocery store. They have a little Starbucks stand, and I got a cup of coffee. And there's a big plastic barrier between me and the barista, which makes sense from a science basis, but is not a good feeling. And so that is a design solution that's certainly scientifically effective, but not experientially effective. And I think I don't know the answer to how to achieve that, to how to achieve both. But I think that those are the questions we have to answer as designers and as entrepreneurs moving forward from this.
and I think too, we're enough time in quarantine that some of this is gonna
Mhm.
become habitual and we don't even understand it.
Right.
Right? Where there's gonna be some that is, as professionals, what's our responsibility to our community? Then there's gonna be
Mhm.
some as professionals, like, how do we encourage revenue and keep our business open? Then there's
Mhm.
gonna be, like, what's our own personal safety? Regardless of the fact that we run a public facing business. And
Mhm.
then like how has state ordinance shaped our behavior in general. And the longer that we remain at home, the more that our habits get shaped. And they're
Mhm.
getting shaped from the start and not from the end, right? Because it's preventative. And so I think we're optimizing this behavior change in a very short amount of time.
Mhm.
So, like, when you imagine what a new, like, let's just say, oh, let's play this game, Charles. Charles, I'm going to open a new boutique,
Okay.
and it's going to be a single store location that's going to be both retail and service.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it's going to be about 1,500 square feet.
Mhm.
And at most, I think like most of the inventory will be on the floor. I need very little backstock space,
Mhm.
like some backstock space, mostly for shipping, but not a ton. I need no refrigeration. There's nothing fresh. Um, what do you think that could look like? Because I'm going to take everything that I know to be quote unquote true and put it down for a holy hot second,
Hmm.
and be open. Let's
Sure.
explore. I'm concerned
Sure.
about community well-being. I'm
Hmm.
concerned about creating a safe environment. I want to be open to the public. I want to make sure that people feel like they can clean their hands. I want to see. I want my customers to see me and my employees washing our hands.
Hmm.
I want services that I can clean, knowing that sometimes soft surfaces don't hold on to things as much as hard surfaces. Like,
Hmm.
what should I be thinking about? What do you think it could be like?
I think my instincts are
Sorry,
telling
hold
me
on. I need a
that's okay.
second because I
No, no,
shifted
no. Take your
and I
time.
lost my earbuds. Okay, you think?
I'm actually amazed mine hasn't fallen out yet. Um, I think now this is a guess. This very early on. I think that the customer experience in a retail environment is going to be more passive, and a salesman experience in a retail environment is going to be much more active. I think that the days of customers picking through inventory, of customers picking up and playing with gadgets is going to change precipitously. I think that you're going to have a higher rate. I mean, this is kind of your area of expertise, but my guess is there's going to be a lot more employees required to serve a lot less customers than usual. But it's going to be a much more engaging experience because employees will be touching inventory often, and customers will be touching inventory rarely, and typically only right before a purchase. And I think that the idea of a showroom, I'm leaning towards a lot more than the idea of a stock room. And there was this big movement in retail for a long time for like the stock room approach, where it's just put all your inventory out there. There's nothing in the back. What you see is what we've got. And I might say, what are your most intriguing pieces, no matter what you sell? What are the most thought inspiring pieces? What's going to cause a customer to ask a question? What's going to cause a customer to ask you to explain or show or open? Those are the pieces you want to put out. Everything else should be in the back, safe and sound. And even if you can't afford to just design physically an experience around each customer, create something unique, tailored to them. Oh, are these the things? Tell me the qualities of the things you're looking for. Let me go find a few things in back and bring them out to you. I think that's one experience that's occurring to me big time.
Yeah, I definitely see a space for that in an average price point that's like 75 and up,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
and needing to think through what does an experience look like when the average price point is a lot lower
It might be
and not
online.
considered essential.
Yeah.
Um, how do we create it's so interesting because it continues to be important for every brand to get super clear about who their muse is and who
Hmm.
their persona is and safety without sacrificing inclusion,
Hmm.
right? Because not every sales person that we want to invite to represent our brand um, is naturally extroverted or whatever you want to say.
Hmm.
And they need to be trained to give that level of service. And not every customer that wants to shop in person is going to be comfortable with that attention,
100%.
right? Like some people just want to shop under the radar.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to explore here, but I love that you and I had a chance to do that. If I could keep you on for another hour, I would, but we can't. So we just spent this hour talking about the creative critique process. And here's what I learned from you. And if you all learned something different from Charles, type it in. I learned that there is value to the creative critique process in the idea that as we put forward work, we really want the work to be the best that it could be for whomever it is designed for. And when we're able to invite critique from a broad range of people, that has the potential to allow us to advance our thinking and advance our creativity. We have to develop our own skill set in terms of receiving and responding. We have to develop our own skill set in terms of like inviting people in and selecting who's going to be in our brain trust. Um, and as we do that, as we invite people in, as we receive the criticism, that we have a responsibility, like an accountability to actually do something with that information. And without that whole process, if we were just in an echo chamber, we would be really, it would really honestly be a sad day because the work couldn't be um, as good as it could be if, if we went through this entire critique process. Did I get that right, Charles?
Oh, 100,000%.
All right. Is there any,
Those are all such great insights.
and those are your insights. So
No,
thanks.
no.
Taking mental notes. Are there any last thoughts that you want to share about giving and receiving creative
I
feedback?
think just lean into criticism, lean into the uncomfortability of the future, especially now. Um, Everybody's very focused on the negative, but I think there's a lot of positive around the corner if we can just sit in this moment, be uncomfortable for a moment. And I personally am just excited. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Charles, can you? I want people to continue to join you in this process of creative exploration. So, share with everyone how they can find you and Design Goggles.
Sure. So Chris mentioned I, host and produce a podcast called Design Goggles through Board and Vellum. It's a podcast about how the world is changing around us in the lens of design. You can find us on virtually any podcast platform like Spotify or iTunes, SoundCloud, you name it. We're on Instagram and all the socials. You can find me there. I've got a couple of blog posts coming out on boardandvellum.com, a series called Learning to Love the Distance about what's coming next for all sorts of design sectors in the new normal. And yeah, go and give it a look.
Yay! Thank you so much, Charles, for being here. I really,
Thank you
really
for
appreciate it.
no, thank you for having me. This is so much fun. So much fun.
And y'all, next week, I want you to come back here at Tuesday at 10 a.m. to join me and Jen from Sendel, the community manager from Sendel, and we're going to talk about a seller's guide to building a community. And
Mm.
Charles's episode was so important as a precursor to building community because it's our responsibility to kind of foster this relationship, to really move towards or stay on track of the creative goal about why we're creating this community. And when we do that, we're actually inviting in a lot of feedback. So I wanted to responsibly prepare you for that feedback and also to invite it. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm super excited. I cannot wait to see you next week. Until then, today would not have been the same without you. All right.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you so much,
Bye.
Chris. Bye.